Hey everyone, welcome. This is week 5, our final week of Zoom chats with Elizabeth Foss and myself. My name is Stephanie Weinert. We're two homeschool moms. It's my just true honor to be on these calls talking with Elizabeth. She's the author of Real Learning Revisited, brand new book, republished. It's been around for a while, but the republished version is just out a couple weeks ago. You can get your copy on Amazon or at elizabethfoss.com. And we've been talking through the book, talking about this concept of what real learning can really be in the heart of your home. We've gone through the big picture, the vision of what it can be. And in the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about the venture. What does the kind of the nitty gritty of the different subjects and this way of life look like, practically speaking, in your family? So we're wrapping up tonight with a lot of different subjects. We're going to talk about history. We're going to talk about science. We're going to talk about religion. Hopefully we'll get to some of your questions too. But for now, please use the comments to chat with each other, to ask your questions. I promise you, if you ask a question during our discussion tonight, even if Elizabeth and I don't get to it, you will find a homeschool mama or a sister friend in this group who will answer your question. She'll post a website or a book recommendation or a link to exactly what you need. So let's join in community here. We would love to see your name in the comments. Tell us where you're listening from. And if you have any questions or want to just chat about anything we're talking about throughout the hour, please use it. The comments become one of the fun parts, one of the most fun parts of these discussions because everybody gets to know each other. So
Absolutely.
Elizabeth, how are you doing up there in Connecticut tonight?
I am fine. It's starting to feel like fall.
I bet you are sooner now, huh?
Really looking forward to it. I just, the hype around here for a New England fall is formidable. So I'm looking forward to it. We're having some really good school days, kind of ironing out the bumps, and the girls are really into it. You know, COVID has made it so that my grandchildren are being homeschooled. That was kind of not planned, and so that's been fun to get to do some of those younger years things. Actually, have a soft spot for the younger years. I really, really, really enjoy early childhood. So it's been really great to have them, and yeah, we're doing fine. Yeah, really good. I'm glad we get to do this. I hope we can get everything that I want to tell you all about done. But also, I think that this might become one of those things that's kind of an occasional series, and we'll be back either with other people or Stephanie, maybe when you're later along in the fall, or maybe when we're all trying to figure out why we're still doing this thing in January and February.
Well, I'll miss you and I'll need you. So we'll have to come up with an excuse to do something, right?
It's really interesting. Like if we get to a year since we first started doing these and go, whoa, this is not new. This is a way of life.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. Well, let's dive right in because we have a lot to talk about. We're going to talk first a little bit about history, and you start that discussion with living books, which is kind of where we've started every topic's discussion, is trying to find true, good, beautiful, life-giving books. Charlotte Mason calls them living books. So let's start there and talk us through your philosophy of doing history at home.
Yeah, so I mean, we did talk about what makes a living book pretty much in great detail. I think the first week, maybe the second week, maybe both. So I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about that, but basically, I don't use textbooks practically at all, with the exception when it comes to history. I like the History of Us series, but it doesn't read like a textbook. It's one author who's clearly passionate. It's a different voice. It's not a textbook kind of voice. I wouldn't even count that as a textbook. And I choose books that make the topic come alive. So we do a lot of historical fiction. We do well-written biographies. We have a plethora of excellent picture books in both history and science. I would encourage you to find picture books that deliver content in an engaging way, and not to limit them to the early childhood years. I mean, I'm still I'm looking to see if I can find an example close by, but I'm still using picture books with my 6th grader, and even to some degree my 8th grader. We have some excellent science picture books that we pull out for the content, and good living books will do that. Like, they will speak to the adults in the room. Historical fiction can just grip the whole family. Historical fiction read-alouds are things that become part of your family culture. I tell a story in the book about how completely enraptured we got with a book about the Oregon Trail, to the point where my kids were playing it forever and still talking about it 10 years later. Like, just, it became something we really remember. So I think that's the thing. You want to look for those books that really grab their attention and structure your curriculum around the living books. In order to have an organizing principle, we use a book of centuries, which is essentially a bound timeline, so that it's like a blank journal that's been labeled. It usually in 100-year spreads, and the child can go add, if you're studying Laura Ingalls and Abraham Lincoln and Caddy Woodlawn, all of them get on the same page, and they can see that those stories all line up. And over the years, that book becomes their record of the people that they've encountered and the events that they've studied. So, and it's a great organizing principle, because it's a visual of what comes where, literally in the book, what comes before and what comes after. So we'll read a story, and I'll have them narrate. And we talked about narrating in one of the earlier Zooms, but basically they're going to tell it back to me. And when they're really little, they're going to tell it. They're going to talk it back to me. They might draw pictures. As they get older, they tell it and I type it. So then they have a written record, and they might add a picture to that. And then they get a little bit older, they're going to start really writing down, what did you hear? What did you learn? And that takes a different level of understanding than just answering the comprehension questions. In order to be able to tell it back, they have to start making pictures in their mind. They have to start engaging their brain. And that's much easier to do with a living book that has a narrative to hang it on. So narration it works so much better with a living book. Or, I mean, we've done narrations with video before, if we're watching a lecture, but it works so much better if that is a teacher who's super engaged and engaging. Yeah. So living books, book of centuries, narration, and you have your science books tie into that too, because you're looking at scientific discoveries, and scientists and all those people go in your book of centuries too. And then field trips, both science and history. Get out and go see. And it's interesting, because now we're living in a little farming town, literally, in Connecticut, in central Connecticut. And we used to live in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. So I used to live a stone's throw from Civil War battlefields, and my kids regularly run, play, whatever, on those battlefields. We had all of the D.C. things in our backyard. We had Colonial Williamsburg and the homeschool days. Like, we would do they have like days in the beginning of September when all the schools are in, but they haven't started doing field trips yet. So they do homeschool days, and we go down and do that. Like, we had a plethora of things. And now I'm like, oh, what do field trips look like? But I'll tell you, they look lovely. We're living in a town that's literally a historical village, and it's, I could tell you the houses we can visit and you'd never heard of them, but they're really amazing. Like, they're a great peek into different points of history. We're not far from the Mark Twain house. We're not far from Boston. We're not far from New York. As soon as the world opens up a little bit, we can go places. There's a children's museum here. I guess my point is that in every town there's something. So find the something. Your town has a history to speak, and the towns around your town have a history. And especially in early childhood, we want our kids to know where they live, like to really know where they live. The same as nature study, when we're focusing so much on them really knowing the plants and the trees in their own backyard. Same deal, know where you live and know what's there and know it well, so that it's yours and it's true and it's familiar. So,
yeah.
I mean, that's the quick and dirty. There's a lot more.
All right. So I have two questions just to follow up based on what I'm seeing in comments, that I know the questions. I know I'm not the only ones with these questions. One is, a couple of moms were asking about Book of Centuries. Do you purchase a certain publisher? Like, where do you get your Book of Centuries?
You know what?
Or do you make your own?
No, I don't make my own, because that would make me nuts. I have purchased from different places. What I would do if I were you is Google it, and Google it with images, or with the sale, the shopping, and look for what's going to suit you best. One of the ones we have is long and like kind of an awkward size. It's a nice size for writing in, and a nice size, but it doesn't like fit in your backpack or whatever. And then another one we have is ring bound and works great. The Charlotte Mason, I'll find you a name, but
Okay.
you can Google it, because really it's a personal thing. I know Sunlight sells some blank ones, and Schoolhouse in the Woods, I think. There are lots of places to get them, but it's very personal, because some kids are going to do better with a different format than others. I have girls right now who have really good handwriting, considering, and did from a very young age, and they can manage the smaller pages, and they like the way that it fits in the backpack, or it lines up with the rest of their books. Where boys, Simply Charlotte Mason, thank you, Kelly, because I could not pull that out. Simply Charlotte Mason makes one that's really good. We have several of that one. But we've used different ones over the years. So.
Okay. And then the other question is, for both the history and the science books, like the picture books that can really add a lot of flavor to studying these subjects, where do you go for book lists on this? Because I think that specific book lists for science, history, picture books are harder to find than just like the read aloud list. There's a lot of read aloud lists. Well,
right.
How do you know what to get? How did you know what to get?
I don't know. I mean, I have a pretty extensive library here. I do a lot of, finding a book that I know I like on Amazon, and then seeing the suggested titles. And a lot of picture books have the See Inside feature. So you can do that. And then you don't necessarily have to buy it. If your library is loaning books out, a lot of times you can just borrow them. And you can also borrow a big, let's say you're going to do bees, right? And you go through the card catalog, and the digital card catalog, you go through Amazon and get a visual on it, reserve the books and pick them all up. But maybe a couple of them are not winners, so you don't read those out loud. You don't put them in the basket. You don't circulate them. There's no harm lost. Whatever, it's fine. And then also talking to other moms. Back in the day that I'm looking here, trying to find Amy, because I know she was here a minute ago. But back in the day when I was collecting books, we had a Real Learning message board, and we traded ideas all the time, and book titles were a big part of it. So it's nice to kind of have a network of there's Amy, have a network of other moms who kind of love good books, and talk books with them. I think that if you're at the Read Aloud Revival, if you're a member there and on the message board, that's a great place to look for book suggestions. And then, use your library and sift and sort. Just because you bring it home doesn't mean you have to read it to them.
Yep, that's good. Okay. I think we just all need a screenshot of Elizabeth's library shelves. I think that's just really the solution. That's what I want. I would pay for that.
And my library shelves have changed so drastically in the last 3 months. But I do have a room. Yeah, it's a very small room, but it's a room dedicated to our picture books. and maybe I'll put that up on Instagram or something and you guys can see it.
You
And
should.
and then the content area books, the chapter books and things like that are just, it was really interesting when we moved to see what my girls did, that, oh no, that's mine. Like, cause in our last house, we had a wall, a giant wall, 9 foot high, very wide, the whole width of the house, where all but the picture books were. And then when that got dispersed here throughout the bedrooms, it was very interesting to see which books got fought over. No, that's mine. That meant more to me than it meant to you. I want it in my room. So there is a post a little ways back in my Instagram of bookshelves, but maybe we'll revisit that.
Yeah, maybe that's our next Zoom Zoom series. All right, let's talk a little bit about art. Can we talk? Is that a good one to do next? Talk a little bit about art.
We can talk all night about art. You want to stay up all night with me? Yes. Okay, so I have a very creative family. I don't know how else to say it, and I used to kind of just stumble over it and say, could I claim that? But I don't even hesitate anymore. I have a very creative family, and it's not just the girls by any stretch of the imagination. My oldest son loved to draw, loved to paint, loved art history, and then fell in love with someone who loves all those things. It was kind of funny. There's a little resistance to her in the very beginning, and I remember saying to him, this has come back to bite me, but does she even like art? And he was like, well, yeah, actually she paints a little. And the rest of the story is that
she's now your illustrator.
Kristen has designed almost all the Take Up and Read books. She's painted almost all the covers. Like, she kind of likes art. And all her kids love art. And then my second son, he's just incredibly creative in like so many ways, both art and music, and just he's very into making movies and all those things. And then I just go through them, and my youngest is ridiculous, and I had no idea really until he got here how just naturally she can draw and paint. But and then all the girls dance, and that's a pretty significant art, and they're pretty good dancers. I could maybe get somebody here to collaborate with that, but they're good. They love it, and they are very creative. That's part of who they are. The dance world, I talk about this a little bit in the Revisited book, because there are definite drawbacks, and I see definite things that we have been concerned about, and places where we need to be very involved. But my girls dance beautifully, and that's one way that we have really nurtured creativity with them. But specifically, you look at art both in terms of appreciation and expression, and I don't even know how to categorize this, but my extended family, my aunt, who has no children, so no grandchildren, is a very serious, very well-established collector of very fine art, and loves my kids. And so they have memories of like being in her house, which is like a museum, surrounded by art, and just thinking nothing of it. And they all have a pretty keen interest in fine art. So picture study is something we've done kind of our own way over the years. Charlotte Easton's picture study is so simple, and it's so easily done in your house. First thing you do is decide on an artist, and then you look for last year's calendar. Like let's say you want Monet. You get on Amazon, you look for a 2020 Monet calendar. It's going to be so cheap, because, right, nobody wants to buy a 2020 calendar in September. So you buy that. Now you have 12 Monet pictures. And you do a little picture book biography of Monet, or more if your kids are older. Set him in a time and a place, and let them care about him as a person. And then once a week, you look at one print, learn the name of it, look at it carefully, talk about it together for maybe 15 minutes, hang it somewhere that they're going to see it all the time, and let them tell you what they saw in that initial time. Let's look at it real carefully. Now tell me what you saw. Go around from the littlest to the biggest, get more and more detail. Then look at it again and say, okay, what did we miss the first time around? Have a discussion, and then just leave it hanging. And my kids usually, almost all of them, with a couple exceptions, have wanted to draw or paint it. I mean, they just always do. Here, we needed a TV when we moved here. And we had a certain dimension that we had to do, so we had to get a new TV. Oh, darn. And we bought a frame TV, which comes with like an art library subscription. And now I just tell Sarah, okay, this month we're going to do 4 of this. You pick the 4. And she's totally into it. And we put that up in the frame, and that's what we look at for a week and talk about and notice. And that is the beginning of art appreciation. I actually, somewhere not far, I think maybe have an art appreciation book that you might have too, Stephanie. Did you
Which
get
one?
that new one?
Vincent's Starry Night?
Yes.
I love that book.
So we are narrating our way through that book. And I've been doing this a long time, and we have a lot of like kids art appreciation books. None of them come close to this one. The whole idea of a living book, that is a living book. It makes art appreciation come alive. They can't wait till they get to the next chapter or the next, story, whatever. They are copying pictures. They're like, and my kids are older, so don't think that your kids are too old for this book. Like, all 3 of mine are using it. It's such a good, comprehensive art appreciation. So it's not picture study. It's technically not Charlotte Mason, except that it's a living book.
But it fits so well with whatever you're doing. You're going to be able to find the artist you're looking for in there.
Fabulous.
My kids love it so much that it travels between our school area when we do school, and then ends up on the coffee table. It ends in someone's bedroom at night. Like, the book just travels our house.
Good book. And this is the cool thing, like, you have good resources. Like, the resources are getting better and better. And some of that is publishing, because we're able to publish better than we did. So I can't even recommend that more highly. And I seriously could go on and on about art appreciation. We'd never get to anything else. But art expression, there are lots of how to draw books out there. There are great YouTube videos. Be sure that you're supervising those and you've previewed them. But I think that when it comes to art expression, it's a literacy thing. Like, we owe them the opportunity to know how to do certain basic things with art, certain basic things with drawing, with painting. Most of this instruction for us comes in the context of nature notebooks. Their drawing lessons are incorporated into the nature notebooks and the nature classes. So we get it that way. When we lived in Virginia, we had a wonderful, wonderful homeschool mom who had kids. She had girls the ages of my 3 older boys, 4 older boys. And so for years, high school art, God bless her, because she gathered all these kids in a great big room. She did art history, and then she did some kind of applied expression. And she knew that that was their social time. They talked, that there were lifelong friendships formed in that class. My son's it's ridiculous. So that's a place where I would definitely co-op, because there is a social aspect. If you have the right person to do it, it's a good idea. But you can also find someone to take drawing lessons through your park authority. You can find a college student who is willing to come over and do some drawing lessons with your kids. And you can YouTube for specific things. Okay, we want to do a watercolor lesson. Let's see what I can find. So materials, I my kids inhale art materials, and my grandchildren do too, like ridiculous reams of paper. We've always had plenty of markers, plenty of paint. The big superstar store for art supplies is Dick Blick. I don't know how this happened in this little tiny town. I have a Dick Blick like 5 miles from me. And it was when we brought the kids up last year, when we were trying to make them feel a little bit better about living here, because there was a little bit of upsetment. I did a mommy date with each one of them, and we did coffee and then like whatever I thought might be the good thing. And that's where Sarah and I went. Like we went to Blick and let her just go, look, this is going to be really close to where we live. So lots of materials. I think my very, very favorite, and I have a lot of favorite creative projects my kids have done, my very favorite one was my second son, who's super quiet and super, just super. He's my special blessing. Anyway, one time he disappeared into the basement for quite a while. I guess I should mention my husband is also extremely creative. He works for ESPN. He's done a lot of work. He's not a set designer. He's a producer, director, but he's done a lot of work establishing studios for about the last 20 years. If there's a new studio to be built someplace in the country, they send him. Knowing that, and knowing that he often took the boys along with him, that's kind of the backstory. But Christian found, I don't know, we had a lot of cardboard. I don't remember what was delivered, but like big boxes. And the hardware store is in walking distance, and he found duct tape, and he created an entire Around the Horn set out of cardboard and duct tape that was life-size. Like he could sit his brothers at it and they could reenact. It was the coolest thing. So I mean it when I say duct tape, cardboard, paint, Legos, all of it. Architecture blocks, like do the whole thing. My kids have all found really, really creative jobs, like almost without exception. Their jobs require them to think outside the box a lot and to be creative. And they appreciate creativity. I just don't even know how to say it. I feel like I'm over speaking, but it's really a thing. Like it's really a thing that kind of makes us tick. It's one of those reasons that I'm very glad that we homeschool, because I've seen it flower in them like crazy.
Yeah. One thing that really helps is having the stuff out all the time, like having the art supplies visually present. And I just wanted to mention this because I'm a person who likes everything design-wise to look really nice, and I don't like seeing all the little kids' art supplies all out all the time. And actually, just tonight, Elizabeth, my table, my kitchen table where we eat our meals was so covered in art from today. We did art study today. We're doing Paul Cézanne. They all watercolored his piece that we were studying. I mean, then they got into cutting and they did snowflakes. I mean, it was the floor, the table, everything was so covered. We could not eat dinner there because they did it until dinner time. So we actually ate dinner on the coffee table in this room, in our family room tonight, because of the art. And I was just right before we got on, I was sweeping up the mess. I was getting glue off the table thinking, somebody's going to one of my children is going to grow up and somehow this is going to be like the thing.
It's true.
Like,
I mean,
I
can't
career.
tell you
But
that.
I have to tell myself that because the mess is hard for some of us. Like, I mean, there's all kinds of memes about moms who hate craft supplies. I mean, you can do it even if you hate it, is basically what
you
I'm
can.
saying.
And I'm super mess phobic. And Kristen is too, so like our art supplies have to look cute too. But truly.
But if it's there all day long, I'm telling you, when I'm like having my first sip of coffee, it could be 6:30 in the morning. My kids, if they're up, they're already sitting down with markers or colored pencils 100%. At our table. They just love it, but it's right there. And I think if it was in the drawer, like the games you put away in the closet are the games they don't play because they forget that chess and whatever is in the closet.
I think that's really true. And I also think that don't think they're too young for the good stuff. We went out oh gosh, I've lost track of time and space and everything else. I think it must have been Monday. Usually my grandchildren come over on Monday afternoon and we do book buddies. And I found a book about Anna Comstock that talks about her nature journals. And then I thought, gosh, I have a few other books that talk about nature journals. And I kind of pulled them all together. And then I sent Katie Quick to Target to buy nature journals for all of them. And her youngest her youngest is a baby, but she's got two 2-year-olds. So two 2-year-olds, a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. And Mike kind of looked at me like, really, nature journals? You're going to give nature journals to the 2-year-old? And they had such a great time drawing in those here outside. And then they took them home, and she was sending me pictures 4 hours later of the 2-year-old girl. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting because the girls were totally into it. I saw Kristen drawing in the little boys. She was like, wait, why didn't I get one? But yeah, I just think that they will keep drawing. And honestly, my kids are so grateful for the opportunity to be creative. The older ones have really actually honestly expressed that. So, I mean, I literally could talk all night about it. And I think it's good for us too.
Yeah.
I think that beauty really restores your soul. And that kind of is a great segue to talking about burnout, but I cannot express it more. I just, we know that beauty inspires us and soothes us and heals us and nurtures us. Like, beauty is a good thing. And helping your children to appreciate beauty wherever you see it. And, by the way, music works a lot in my house, works a lot the same way picture study does. You introduce a composer, and then you say, Alexa, play Mozart. And there you go. You have Mozart going for you.
Oh, God. On Amazon Music.
That's too funny. She did that on purpose. That was a show and tell, y'all.
I do this all the time. I forget, and we're talking about
so great. I love it.
Anyway, that's how easy it is. So you pick. I'm so tired. I could laugh about that for a while. But you pick a composer, you read the biography, you put it in the books of centuries, and then what I do, particularly with classical composers, is I do what I just did before they get out here in the morning, and it's playing and it's going, and then we just say that's who that is. I will say this. Mozart is the soundtrack of our school. The last essay in Real Learning, the original, talked about Mozart being a soundtrack while my son Michael was reading while holding Stephen as a baby. And Stephen asked to write the last essay in Real Learning Revisited, and he read it. He was like, no way, he did that? And I was like, yeah. And he said, did you know that I can't study without Mozart? And I was like, no, that's pretty cool. You should put that in the essay. But there are great picture book biographies of composers, and then you just cycle through. And, Stephanie, we're putting together a blog that I just don't want to promise this website because I'm so overwhelmed right now, but we're moving. I had this serendipity blog on TypePad, and it had tons of living book suggestions. We're moving it to Squarespace. It's going to be called realserendipity.com, and I will really try to get the word out because there are so many living book suggestions and curriculum ideas and unit studies. And the big push here was to get the book out and then circle back and make this, that website's very dated in the sense that a lot of the links are dead. Some of the books are out of print, so we wanted to find some fresher ones, but not eliminate the out of print ones because they're worth looking for. Amy, I'm going to unmute you. Can you talk? Here. Amy's got a word.
Oh, I do? Okay,
Sure.
What do you want me to talk about?
Okay, so I just wanted you've used it, serendipity, extensively. I just wanted you to talk about how it works.
A lot of like unit studies. So we would start with picture books and we would read, to everyone. And then I would assign bigger books, harder books to my oldest was an avid, very early reader, like Magic Treehouse books on his own, whole book, 30 minutes at 5 years old. Like, just, yeah, haven't had another one like him. I thought that was normal for a long time.
Got a rude awakening.
Got a rude awakening after that. But it was just so fun. Like, we did the alphabet path so many times with all my girls. I was reading Christopher's Harvest. Is it Christopher's Harvest time?
Yep.
This morning with my youngest, who's 6, my Michael.
Try.
And I did.
Yep.
Just because I just started my oldest in college. And so now my baby's, we're starting over. And such great memories. Just, yeah, it was just so good.
So, and it's arranged kind of unit study-ish, where I'll give you reading suggestions for a topic across ages. And I will try so hard to get it up in the next couple of weeks. So if y'all can pray for that. And then I'll let you know, Stephanie, and we'll tell you if once it's up and there for you. Because it's a good resource. It's especially, there's enough there that if you're homeschooling this year, that'd be plenty for the whole year for whoever you have. So
I will say, when my littles, when they were all little, my age gaps got bigger with each kid. Mm-hmm. The reading aloud at that volume of the amount of books was overwhelming, but I would just pick my favorites and I would put the rest out so they could see the front.
And I think that's fine. I also,
they did great.
That is a great point. You don't have to read it all,
Right.
We all start to have our favorites, and the ones that you revisit because they were your favorite, your kids, they sense that enthusiasm. They know that was a favorite. Because you can't help but tell them that. Thank you, Amy.
Oh, thank you.
Good to have you in here.
Thanks.
So anyway, that's kind of, the quick and dirty of living books kind of being the anchor, and then just plenty of room to express themselves creatively. I just think it's really key that they get that. And that is a beauty to home education, because we can go on those rabbit trails. And if you want to spend, Sarah has done this thing. I'm looking again. I think it's in the house. We're doing Nanowrimo, which is the National Novel Writing Month, which doesn't start until November, but my girls are acting a little bit competitive and ridiculous, and they've already started sketching it all out. So, we were talking about characters and such, and I discovered today that she's drawing all her characters. Like, she's got these characters in mind for her book, and there's drawings all of a sudden all over the house with these weird names. I'm like, who is this person? Why are you drawing him? And she's like, I made him up. And I think that's the beauty. Like, that wouldn't work if the assignment in a classroom was to write a character sketch. This drawing would not be a thing, but this is honestly how she's organizing her thoughts. And so I encourage you to encourage them to be creative, whether the medium is pen and paper or a keyboard or cardboard boxes and duct tape. And that kid, by the way, did go on to do quite a bit of set design. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, try these things, y'all. When I started getting into the Charlotte Mason philosophy, and you read or you listen to someone talk about picture study or art appreciation or music appreciation or living books for history, and you think, how could I teach my children without a textbook and a workbook and a curriculum package? And it sounds scary. And then all of a sudden you try it and it's almost so easy. You're like, could this be enough? Like, could this be it? And it works so well. And it really is simple. Like, it's simple and it works. And so that was the freeing light bulb thing for me in my homeschool journey. Is it was so much easier than the stacked piles of workbooks and ordering all the curriculum and daily worksheets and everything. It was so much easier for the teacher's perspective, and they learned so much more. They were so free in their learning. So I hope you try it and see that it's just really is a very freeing form of education.
It's very peaceful.
Well, I don't know around here.
No, I think that you can have a sense of peace about it. It is a peaceful way to educate.
It is.
Now, that's not to say that it's not rowdy. And it's also not to say that it doesn't get chaotic and exhausting and that we can run ourselves ragged. Like we can burn out. It happens.
So let's talk about that.
So I think the burnout chapter, I haven't actually done the page count. I'm pretty sure the burnout chapter is the longest chapter in the book, which I think speaks volumes. And that's probably the one where the revisited is maybe the most different from the original. And that's not to say that all of the advice in the original isn't really good. All the advice in the original is prevention advice. And I do want to talk about that. Like, I feel like that's important, to talk about taking care of mom and knowing what that means for you personally. Like, how do you sharpen your saw? Because if you're getting run down and the saw's getting dull, then you're not going to get the job done anyway. So take the time to stop and start sharpen the saw. I think it's important that one thing I even now remind myself of all the time is how I take care of myself when I'm pregnant. Okay, so I get enough sleep. I eat much, much better. I never miss a vitamin. Those things that you do when you're carrying a baby and you're responsible for that baby's well-being. Why can't we treat ourselves that well when we're not pregnant? Because we're still responsible for the well-being of a human being. And so I will do that. I will remind myself that if I were pregnant, I would not push that limit. If I were pregnant, I would make sure I was drinking enough water. And it is a good trigger in the sense that I'm a really good pregnant person. So I think that that's one way to tune in really to what is genuine self-care, as in caring for yourself.
That is brilliant. I've never thought about it like that before, but you're so right. You're so right.
Like, I haven't had a baby in 11 years, but
yes, I never missed my vitamins pregnant. I miss them all the time these days.
Right.
Oh.
And, I would never push the reasonable limits of sleep that I do now. Like the last 3 days, I literally haven't slept, and I would never do that if I were pregnant. So, so that's a useful way of like thinking about it. We all need time alone. Some of us need a lot of time and space somehow to get time and space to ourselves. I remember ages ago reading a essay by Amy Wellborn where she talked about how she was way too much of an introvert. Homeschooling would never work. Amy Wellborn is now a rock star homeschooler. She is crazy good. But knowing what you need in terms of time and space to yourself, nature. I drilled that one down really a lot last week. But the natural world, being out there, it's good for you. It's good for your kids. Get outside every day. Prayer and sacraments and spiritual direction, frequent confession, not because you're screwing this up, but because it's so nice to start with that clean slate and to get that fresh grace. I think it's important when we talk about burnout, it's important to know that a lot of times when we're burned out, our husbands are too. The very first time I ever talked about burnout, it took me a year to write the talk. Like, it was this has been a year and I'm logging this and this is going to become a talk. And I remember as I was putting the talk together, reading aloud a definition of burnout to my husband and him saying, "You understand. How did you know?" And I'm like, hey, I wasn't talking about him, but I guess I'm not going to let on. This was not about you. This is about me. But the idea that a lot of times when you're married, what you're feeling and what you think is you feeling it is both of you feeling it. And it helps to really talk about it and to say, like, what would help you? What will help me? How can we help each other? It also really helps to have a homeschooling friend, like just one good buddy that not who's going to say, pat you on the back and say, okay, you're great, awesome all the time, but might say, well, maybe you should just take a day off and sleep, or maybe, you know, your plans aren't really tight enough and this is why there's chaos. And you know, just a good homeschooling buddy who knows your kids. And it's nice if it's a real life, like in-person person, because knowing your kids and knowing your husband and knowing your situation is really insightful. And I think that really helps.
Yeah.
And then I think we haven't talked about chores, and maybe we'll come back and we'll do something about chores, but like the whole idea of your role as a homemaker and the people in your family being integral to the way your household runs. You don't have to do it all by yourself. You'd be amazed at what a 5-year-old can do to actually be a help, and really look at, you know, Stephanie, you were talking about how important order and beauty is to you. And for a mom who's homeschooling and her house is being overrun by her kids and she doesn't ever have time without them in it to put it in order, this can make her nuts. I know this personally. I know this was a thing for me. I struggled with it the whole time I had like 6 or more kids at home. So basically until like 2 months ago. You know, just the idea that I need order and I will function better in order, and this house is not who I am. I need to live in a house that's who I am. And when my kids were really little, Mike would take them, like my 3 boys, he would take them and he would go pick up his dad and he would have a detailed list. He'd go grocery shopping. He'd leave me at home for 3 hours. Like they go grocery shopping and then they go back and hang out at his parents' house. And I would like blitz through my house and get it clean. But that meant the world to me. You know, he'd come home, we'd have groceries, the house is clean. Like this was necessary. So figure that out. I think it's important to really, we talked about this. I don't know if we've talked about this recently. We definitely talked about it in the spring. Look at rhythm and roles. Who are you? You know, you're a mom, you're a wife, you're a teacher, you're whatever else you are out there. And right now, a lot of women are a lot of other things. You know, you're a mom, you're a wife, you're a teacher. One of my friends is an ESPN executive. You know, like she's all those things. Look at those things and know who you are and know what your priority is. Like literally put them in order and then figure out, okay, am I allocating my time according to my priorities? Because burnout a lot of times happens when we feel overwhelmed and stressed. And the overwhelmedness comes from your priorities being out of whack. So maybe you are working part-time, or maybe you're even working full-time, but you say that your priority is this year, you have to make sure your kids get an education. That tension of I can't do my job well and do school well, that causes burnout, the tension between the two. And that's where you have to sit down with your husband, maybe sit down with a spiritual director and figure out how to dial the tension back a little bit. I think 2020, the reality is that we are all going to exist in some tension. Like, I don't know what's happened. I don't know why the world's tilting the way it is, but it is. So it's probably a pipe dream to think that we'll be without it entirely, but aligning your priorities and committing to on paper to the way you really want to spend your life. I said spend your life. I meant spend your time, but really spend your life. That will help a lot with burnout, because that overwhelmed feeling of I'm not doing the thing that's important to do makes you nuts. And then the part that I added in the new book, last year, I don't even want to call it burnout because it wasn't, because I was pretty sick. But I had this thing going on where basically they were trying to figure it out. But while they tried to figure it out, they said, don't get your heart rate up. And by the way, don't turn your head or you could just have a stroke and die. So my way of dealing with burnout has always been exercise. It's always been walking like miles and miles and miles. And I couldn't do that. And I really believe that this was God's way of making me be still, like sit still. And I dropped my kids off at dance, and there was a church maybe 2 miles from the studio. And it wasn't my parish, but it had a 24/7 adoration chapel. And one day, right as this whole health horror was unfolding, you know, I dropped him off, and I'm like, I don't know what to do, because I'm so used to dropping them off and finding a trail that this is weird. What am I going to do? And I drove to this church, and I just sat there. And some pretty miraculous things happened over the course of a year of sitting there, probably 3 or 4 times a week. And, you know, eventually I got a little more organized about adoration time, but now when somebody says burnout, I say adore. Like that's my first instinct, is just carve out, figure out how, trade off with another mom, ask your husband. It doesn't have to be an hour, but get yourself still in front of the sacrament. And here, it's pretty unusual for there to be an adoration chapel. There were everywhere in Northern Virginia, but here it's very unusual. But that time before the tabernacle is no less valuable. And that's kind of all I have to say about that right now. But I have another book coming out tomorrow. We talk about adoration a lot. So I think tomorrow, maybe the next day, sometime next week. But yeah, so all of those
Essential Holiness, is that it's called Essential Holiness, and they can find it where Elizabeth is the worst. I tell her all the time that I'm going to hire myself as her marketing director, because she writes a book and doesn't mention it. I have another book coming out tomorrow, Essential Holiness by Elizabeth Foss. And where can people find out about it, Elizabeth?
It'll be in Amazon sometime next week. Follow Take Up and Read on Instagram, and that's where to get all the information right now. And I think I feel a little bit differently about this, Stephanie. I am so passionate about the message in this book and how life altering it is, that I'm going to get over my terrible self-promotion issues and just promote what's in it. I think it's the kind of book that I really want to get, and not that Real Learning isn't, because it is too, but I was just so shy about the whole thing. But I want to stand on a rooftop and shout it's what it is. So anyway, lots of adoration in that one. But then we're running out of time, and I really, really want to talk to you just real quickly about religion. And the Real Learning has lots of ideas for living the liturgical year and living books for religion, and celebrating. We when my kids were little, we had tea time every day at 3:00, and we would read saint stories, or we would just talk about whatever the feast was that day. And my big boys remember it, and my little girls don't. Well, they probably didn't even do it because that became soccer practice running and dance running and all of that, and we kind of lost it. But we have always used religious art and used sacramentals and lived the liturgy, and all of that is in the book. But I kind of wanted, like, one thing that people ask me all the time that's so awkward right now is, you know, how do I keep my kids Catholic? And so that's kind of the direction. The way Real Learning Revisited is set up is it's the original Real Learning, which was written 20 years ago. And then at the end of every chapter is a, well, how did that work out? Kind of honest essay. My kids say I've told all kinds of secrets. I really haven't, but I don't think we really have any secrets, but I try to be super honest. And so in this chapter, I wanted to kind of express some things that I hear moms of bigger kids saying all the time, and just kind of encourage you. So what I did, because I do want this to be well organized and I don't want to babble, is I printed out that essay, and I'm going to read it to you just so you get the whole thing. And that's kind of how we're going to end this. So, in the book, there is an entire unit study that we do for Advent and Christmas, and we even still do it, centered around the Tommy DePaula books. And Tommy DePaula, since I wrote that study, after I wrote that study, he added books to it. Like, we were always collecting more Tommy DePaula Advent and Christmas books and other really great saint books. He died this year because it's 2020. And it was, my kids cried. Like, it was, this is like the epitome of a living book in our house. You know, he really taught them so much about heroes, saints in the faith. So anyway, that's the backstory, because it begins with that. So here you go. Firstly, know that Tommy DePaula grew to be more and more beloved in our household, and his books are a mainstay even to this day, all year round. Eternal rest grant to him, O Lord. We are so much poorer for the books he never got to write. Throughout the years, picture books with saint stories and those beloved vision biographies served us well. My children are well acquainted with the communion of saints, and familiarity begs them to converse with heavenly friends on a regular basis. Saint stories are as much a part of the understanding of their heritage as stories of their grandparents. We make a daily habit of scripture study. Usually my girls join me for the Take Up and Read study on Instagram every day. Okay, Stephanie, I'm going to promote this.
Okay, go ahead.
At 9 o'clock.
Good.
In the morning, every morning, but not tomorrow. Every weekday, usually, not tomorrow. I get on the Take Up and Read Instagram, and we do a quick 15-minute scripture study. So that's what I'm talking about there. So meet us there. Take Up and Read, Instagram, 9 o'clock. They are learning to lean heavily into the wisdom of the word, to write down the margins of their own Bibles, and to seek the consolation of the gospel when life is hard. I remind them that when I have struggled most, it is scripture and sacrament that save me. I know they'll face hard times. I hope they'll carry my habit into their lives. As my children grew older, tea time gave way to competing schedules for soccer and dance. In the very busy, very messy middle years, it all but disappeared. We've reinstated it now, here in a new home with only 3 girls left. I'm glad for the tradition and glad for the second chance, particularly since these are the girls who never got it at all the first time around. It's time to talk and to breathe. There's room to celebrate a feast with a thoughtful treat or two. But the days of cupcake catechism are long past. Now we drink tea, or maybe even decaffeinated coffee, and we're pretty careful about limiting the sweets. What matters most is the intention to give one another our undivided attention. The lifelong habit is not the elaborate feast day parties. It's the intention of setting aside a bit of time to remember the saint whose feast is celebrated throughout the universal church, to talk about what we're reading, and to really dig into the inevitable questions that come when one has a lively faith. It's the questions that keep us honest. When people ask how to keep kids Catholic, I tell them I don't know. Every child is on a journey. Rarely does the journey travel an entirely straight road. Thinking children and adolescents inevitably have thoughtful questions about the faith. I like to wrestle those questions with them. I'm not afraid to pull out C.S. Lewis or Peter Kreeft and really dig deep into the doubts that teenagers raise. There was a time when I was. There was a time when I thought that if they questioned, I'd failed. There was a time when their diversion from our family's profession of faith caused me to panic. Now I admit to them that I've had questions and doubts too. I share, as appropriate for their age, my own nights of spiritual darkness, my own days of disappointment in people of the church. I am honest, and with that honesty, I hope to prove myself trustworthy. If I'm trustworthy, they'll let me travel beside them. They will approach me with their doubts. They will let me bind their wounds. We can be Christ to one another and create genuine Christian community in our home. I have no delusions that I can be their Holy Spirit. Faith is a gift. It is God who gives that gift. I'm here to take good care of it on their behalf when they are very small and cannot care for it themselves. And I'm here to show them the good habits of care that healthy, mature adults cultivate over a lifetime. My kids know that if I'm having a bad day and suddenly go missing, I'm probably at adoration. They know that I think confession is the best cure for a bad attitude. And they know that I hold that daily Mass has immeasurable value. It is the very best way to raise a child in the faith. The habit of praying that liturgy with the universal church, of showing up to receive the graces that God extends, of humbling oneself before the altar in order to be equipped for everyday life, is one that I can cultivate with them and one they can witness in me. I don't know how to keep kids Catholic. I do know that the most important thing they can learn from me is to commit wholeheartedly to living out my faith. In the years since the first edition of this book was published, my family suffered mightily because of the actions of people who profess to be Catholic. Those were very hard days, and we bear the scars. But my children know that I believe that Christ is really present in the church and that I would die without him. They know I've been asked, do you also wish to go away? And they know that with my whole life, I've answered, Lord, to whom can I go? You have the words of eternal life. I have come to believe and know that you are the Holy One of God. This is the living faith curriculum I have to offer. It's the only one I know. And that's the best way I can end this for you.
The end. Well, thank you for this. Thank you so much for this. Even if I was the only one who showed up through all these, it was infinitely worth it to me. It's such an honor to do this with you, Elizabeth. I just feel so honored that you allowed me to be on these calls with you, and thank you for everything you shared with us. Please go get Elizabeth's book. Everybody needs her book. And somebody who's has not been introduced to our Zoom calls yet also needs this book. This has been a crazy year of a lot of women learning on the fly what it means to have her children learn at home. And this is an amazing resource to share with her and bless her life. And this can be a lifeline for her too. So please share the Zoom calls. They will all be on YouTube, Elizabeth's channel and my channel. And then her book is available on Amazon or on her website, elizabethfoss.com.
Okay. Thanks for being
here.
Stephanie, you're not off the hook. We're coming back.
Okay. It sounds good.
We will. We'll have
time
sometime. We'll be back. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Good night, everybody. God bless
night.
you all. Have a good night.